Howdy y'all, Fuzzy Biker. We are on the Hot Rod Himalayan today, and it's quite a big day for this hot rod. I just flipped over 21,000 miles. By the way, we're out here at Murray Hill Scenic Overlook. But anyway, let me show you this here real quick. I'm pretty proud of this. These are my Royal Enfield gloves, and I'm pretty proud of those too. But let's turn that hot rod on. Mileage, 21,002. 0.8. How about that, huh? Anyway, I just put this new back tire on about 1,200 miles ago. Anyway, I thought I'd give you guys a rundown on the handful of problems that I've had with this bike over the last 2 years since I got her. And I'm going to start with the simplest problems that I've had and kind of work my way, to the most complex ones. And then at the end, I'm going to give you a little info on what I expect to have. What are the things I expect to come up when owning this motorcycle? What are the kind of problems I expect to have? And I might talk a little bit about, I want to talk a little bit about riding a motorcycle if I think of it. So the first thing I want to talk about, since we've got the key on already, is the compass. When I got this bike has a compass right here. And all of us lucky Royal Enfield owners that have these kind of bikes, we know that that compass just doesn't work. And in the beginning it worked a little bit, and you have to reset it, and everybody tells you, oh, do this, do that. There's all kinds of magic stuff you're supposed to do, and it works, and it goes back to the problem. One of the problems I think I have is that where I park my motorcycle, the 200 amp service for my house is about 5 feet away from the bike. And I don't know if that affects my bike or not. What I do know is that if you've owned a Royal Enfield for very long, your compass does not work. So the next thing I got on my list, I got a neat little list right here, is the seat. This is not the stock seat. I've had, this is the third seat I've had on this. I had the stock seat by about 8,000 miles. I was just sick of it. I'd wore it down to it was just a soft piece of foam. So I bought what they call the touring seat. And it was about the same shape, but it was a little harder rubber, about the same shape as the original seat. And it did okay. It was a little firmer, a little more comfortable, but it still had the same problem. One of the problems it had was the shape of the seat. It kind of has a cutout in it. And I've seen that work, kind of saddle shape. I've seen that work on other motorcycles, but it just did not work for me on this bike. I bought this seat. This is a seat concept seat right there. I ordered it tall, so it's 1.5 inches taller than the normal seat. And I also ordered, it's also wider, by the way. I also ordered it with hard rubber, firm cushion. So and I've had a really, I like that seat a lot. So I've had it, 5,000 miles now, and it works really good for me. Next thing I got on here is front end rattles, and this is one I continue to have. The front end of this bike, I've had all kinds of things, come loose and rattle, and a little light in there that breaks, and it's actually broken right now. I've had all kinds of things. I had the last time I had this part, this had actually come loose at the top. I've had to put this rubber on here to help with that. It's just part of the ownership of the bike. And like I said in my last video, one thing I got to admit to is that I ride this bike pretty hard sometimes in some pretty ruddy, rough roads. And this goes up and down quite a bit. So another thing I did, the windscreen that came on this bike was small. And for me, that just did not work. I ride a lot of motorcycle, like it's 2 years old. This bike's got 21,000 miles. Of course, I've got a couple other motorcycles, but I went on a long trip, and I came out of that wanting a big windshield, and I found this is the biggest windshield I could find. I found this Calci, I think it's called. I got this at Baxter Cycle, baxtercycle.com. Actually, I got everything, all the add-ons I got at Baxter Cycle, I would say. I have really enjoyed it. It didn't quite work right when I got it. The mounting points that came with the motorcycle weren't firm enough, so I had to rebuild those. And then there was something in here. These are called well nuts. The well nuts on the top held, but the bottom one's pulled out. So I had to put, I don't know if you can see that on this side. I had to put washers back there. I put fender washers and lock nuts back there. And I did the same thing down here for this to hold it. But, it's firm enough and it works pretty good. And I really do like that. That's one of the great things I added to this motorcycle, I believe. Next thing on the list was, and this just happened, this squeaky swing arm thing. And I fixed the headlight and got rid of all that noise, the rattly stuff up there. Well, I got about 15 miles away from Baxter Cycle, and I noticed a squeak down here. So I went back in, showed it to them. They isolated it, said, oh, we know just what that is. And all of a sudden they tore that whole thing apart. There's a bolt in there. I don't want to pull it apart, but it's humongous. I mean, it's just super thick. And what it is the swing arm pivot point. you know, the swing arm attaches to it. That's how the swing arm attaches to the frame. And they pulled that out, and there's, I don't know if there's bearings or bushings or some sort of stuff in there, but they took care of that. Re-greased it, do, you know, whatever they did. They had it all done in about 20 minutes. I really appreciate that, and they were, you know, right on it. And that happened, so that, you know, the bike had just about 20,000 miles on it when that happened. And I ride a lot of dirt, so 20,000 miles, I'll bet you 40% of that's on dirt and gravel. So another thing that happened to me, next thing on this nifty list, that was it happened a couple times, was the venting system for the tank plugged up. And I took it in the Baxters, they fixed it. And when that happened, how I knew it happened was when I'd open the tank, the lid would just explode open, just pop, you know. And it happened, and the second time it happened, the bike was spewing gas on the pavement, you know, sitting in the sun, and they fixed that. Well, after that, came out to my garage one day, and there's a little bit of gas on the ground. Took the seat off, looked around, and there was a little tiny leak in the tank. So I went to Baxter Cycle. They ordered me a new tank on the spot. A week later, they had it put back on. We put the new stickers back on it. You know, I had the old tank had stickers. If you want to see the old tank, it's over at Baxter Cycle in the Royal Enfield section of the building. Anyway, that was kind of a bit of an issue for a minute. And that was one that, well, anyway, enough about that. So the big one, the second to the biggest one, I would say, and one that I'm sure everybody has heard about, this is a 2001 model, and my understanding is it was worse than this model, is the stalling issue. So these bikes you'd come to a stop, pull in the clutch, come to a stop, and the bike would just die. You'd have to hit the start button and start right back up. And that went on for a while, and I love the bike so much, I did not take it into Baxter's to get it fixed. I put up with it, actually, and I think the first month I had this motorcycle, I put something like 5,000 miles on it. So anyway, finally I took it in, I called Baxter's up and said, hey, I got the problem. I drove up there and I showed it to them, and they pushed the bike in the back. Half an hour later, 90% of that problem was gone. And they said if it comes back, bring it back. So I waited another couple weeks. I did have just a little bit of it left, a very, very small amount. Went back, and they did something. They took the seat off, hooked things up, hooked up machines, did all kinds of neat stuff. And I know you guys are going to ask me what they did. I'm just going to tell you right now, I really don't know what they did. As far as I know, it's some sort of a magic spell they put on it, or some sort of voodoo or something like that. But what I do know is it doesn't stall anymore, and it works really good. Now here's the biggest problem I've had with this motorcycle. The last thing I'm going to tell you about problems anyway. And or about current problems or problems I've had. And I don't know what to do about this one. I just don't know if there's any hope for this one, actually. And that is, this motorcycle is perpetually dirty. I take it to the car wash, the next day it's filthy. Sometimes even an hour or two later it's filthy. It's dusty, it's cruddy, it's always got, you know, just look at that. I mean, look at that rim. And, you know, I'm supposing that has something to do with the amount of gravel I run. I'm levity, it's levity, right? Making a joke, ha ha ha. But no, this bike is always filthy, and I clean it, and it's just, you know, it's a gravel bike. What do you do, right? Life is life of a gravel bike, right? So what about problems I expect to have in the near future? According to Royal Enfield, I should continuously check my head bearings. That's part of the maintenance thing. And I do that frequently, and I haven't had that problem yet. I've heard of other people having problems with it. I've never seen a motorcycle, I've seen a lot of Himalayans, but I've never seen one with a problem. So, you know, we'll just keep an eye on that. The other one I've heard people talk about are wheel bearings. And again, I check that constantly every time I out on the center stand. Not every time, but often. And so far, so good. But, you know, 21,000 miles, something like that's bound to come up pretty quick, I suppose. Next one is brake pads. You know, the brake pads in the front were good. They did there was a recall on the calipers, and they put those on the front pads were fine. The back ones were about half gone, so I'm going to probably replace the back ones pretty soon. I also expect the front end to continue to give me the rattling problem, and I actually know it will because it's already doing so now a little bit. I just don't know. I don't think there's any way to really get rid of it. It's just part of the ownership experience, I guess. And of course, you know, we're going to have to put tires on it, and new chain and things like that periodically, oil and valves and things like that. The chain I changed at 9,000 and then again at 18,000. So it's worked out pretty well. So the last thing I'd like to kind of talk about is the, I guess it's the art of motorcycle riding, or the skills, or, you know, something like that. So, and I want to talk about how good this motorcycle is for developing skills and learning to ride, and how this dirt bike, or bike that I ride on gravel and dirt a lot, will increase your skills of riding on pavement. When you learn skills, you learn, you know, the nuts and bolts of it, how they work, you know, when to put on your brakes, things like that. Then you go out and practice them. That's practicing your skills. You know, practical, you know, you have to think about it, you have to do it right. You learn the mechanics first, you learn the skills of using it, then as time goes on, you kind of learn the art of it. You know, it becomes automatic, things, you start to play with it. And motorcycles like this, they're low power. This is a 24 horsepower motorcycle. They've got good handling, they've got a lot of flexibility. You really learn to get the most out of riding. You know, you learn really to take full advantage of the handling, and how to get the most power out of the engine, how to use the clutch properly or to the best advantage. And that's the kind of thing that a motorcycle like this, you know, develops. Now I've got between 500,000 and 1 million miles on motorcycles. This is one of the funnest motorcycles I've ever owned, probably the funnest motorcycle I've ever owned. And that's, I think, one of the reasons is the art of motorcycle riding. It lets you use those to the maximum amount. So getting a motorcycle like this for a beginner lets you develop those skills better, and for an experienced rider, it's the same thing. It lets you use those skills, practice them, you know, develop the art of motorcycle riding to a higher degree. But hey, life is good. I got 21,000 miles on my hot rod Himalayan. I think I'm going to put this camera up and I'm going to go for a hike. Wahoo! More of that yucca right there. You can see the plant life here. Isn't that pretty? We're in September in Iowa. So, I mean, just, you know, things are just starting to turn colors. So there's a big old bumblebee. Gorgeous, gorgeous. I'm not sure what this is. If any of you all know, please post. And of course the yucca again. I don't want to touch this, but little seed pods.